Welcome back to our news bulletin. Coronavirus deaths in the EU have exceeded the toll in Asia for the first time as the continent grapples to contain the disease. The bloc has at least 3,421 deaths compared with 3,384 for Asia. The European Union has sealed off its external borders for 30 days to curb the spread of coronavirus. EU leaders have also agreed that internal borders that have been erected in recent days should come down. Italy has the highest death toll in Europe with over 2,500 fatalities, followed by Spain with 600. In Spain, health officials said the tally of coronavirus cases rose to 13,700. France has reported 7,730 cases of coronavirus in the country with 175 deaths. It has announced a 45 billion euros aid package to help businesses and employees cope with the escalating health crisis. The WHO says countries must act now to tackle the virus. Meanwhile, in the U.S., the Trump administration has unveiled a $1 trillion stimulus package to mitigate the economic fallout of the COVID-19 outbreak. The coronavirus pandemic has killed over 100 people in the country. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says the White House has proposed an additional $300 billion in tax deferrals. Mnuchin said the Treasury will also provide $10 billion of capital to the new fund facility from the Treasury's Exchange Stabilization Fund. The package is larger than the U.S. response to the 2008 financial crisis and amounts to nearly a quarter of what the U.S. federal government spent last year. Meanwhile, the UK has announced $423 billion in financial measures to shore up the economy against the impact of the coronavirus. Now moving towards U.S. presidential elections. Former Vice President Joe Biden has crushed his rival Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders in the latest round of Democratic presidential primaries. Biden defeated Sanders in the states of Florida, Illinois, and Arizona by wide margins. Biden's decisive victories have earned him a nearly insurmountable lead over the leftist Sanders in their race for the party's presidential nomination. With most pressings reporting, Biden beat Sanders by nearly 40 percentage points in Florida, 20 points in Illinois, and over 10 points in Arizona. The pressure is mounting on Sanders to end his campaign as Biden secured his 19th victory in the last 24 primary contests.
Today, it looks like once again, in Florida and Illinois, we're still awaiting to hear from Arizona. Our campaign has had a very good night. We've moved closer to securing the Democratic Party's nomination for president. And we're doing it by building a broad coalition that we need to win in November.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has also won the Florida and Illinois Republican primaries, making him the party's presumptive nominee. Now on towards Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says Tehran has and will continue responding to America's assassination of Major General Qasem Soleimani. The 62-year-old general was killed in a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad in January. In a televised speech, Rouhani said the Americans assassinated Iran's great commander and Tehran will retaliate. Meanwhile, the U.S. has imposed fresh sanctions on Iran despite its death toll surging to over 1,130. Health officials say the total number of confirmed cases has crossed 17,300. The U.S. has placed the new ISIS leader Amir Mohammad Abdul Rahman al-Mauli on its blacklist of terrorists. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington remains committed to destroying the group after ending its foothold in Iraq and Syria. Pompeo said al-Mauli replaced Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi after he was killed during a raid by U.S. commandos in October. Earlier, when ISIS named Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qureshi as its new head, U.S. officials said the group was using a pseudonym. Al-Mauli was named a specially designated global terrorist after 9/11, and a $5 million bounty has already been issued for his capture. In Iraq, 2 rockets have struck the capital Baghdad's high-security green zone near the U.S. Embassy. Security officials say the projectiles hit an apartment building and wounded 3 people. They said no diplomatic missions in the Green Zone were affected. Spokesperson for the US-led coalition, Miles Kagan, said the rockets fell at least 2 kilometers from the embassy. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack yet. Earlier, rockets hit a military base at Bezmaya, where US-led coalition troops and NATO forces are deployed alongside Iraqi troops. More from the Middle East. Clashes have erupted in the Libyan capital Tripoli between the UN-backed government forces and militias of Khalifa Haftar again. In a statement, spokesman for the government of National Accord said that violence broke out in Ramla axis in southern Tripoli. He said clashes were still raging on in the area. The spokesman said, as of yet, there is no confirmation of casualties. Earlier, the EU and several Arab countries called on the warring sides to declare an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. In Afghanistan, at least 2 Afghan security forces have been killed in clashes with the Taliban in northern Balkh province. A police spokesperson said dozens of Taliban fighters were also killed in the province's Chahar Bolak district. The spokesperson said the incident resulted in the closure of the main Balkh-Jauzen highway. Meanwhile, the Taliban claimed they killed 2 policemen in Kapisa province. In a tweet, spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said 7 others were injured when their security vehicle hit a roadside IED bomb in the Shahkot area. The Indian government has ordered a continuation of the communications blackout, including an internet ban in occupied Kashmir. The valley has been reeling under India's curfew and clampdown for the last 227 days. The Indian Home Ministry said the ban will remain due to the alleged security scenario in the occupied valley. The ministry said restrictions on mobile data speed have been imposed to prevent misuse of social media. The 8-month-long shutdown has caused a humanitarian crisis in the valley. Indian authorities have arrested top Kashmiri politicians and pro-freedom leaders to curb all voices of dissent. In India, the students of Jawaharlal National University in New Delhi have put up a poster of Pakistan's founder Muhammad Ali Jinnah on a board. JNU students have been at the forefront in protests and rallies against the Citizenship Act. The students took the step after the administration named a road after Hindutva philosopher Vinayak Damodar Sarvarkar. The University Students' Union said naming a road after Savarkar is a shame on the GNU's legacy. The union said it can never accept apologists and stooges of the British who undermined India's secular fabric. Police in India's northern state of Uttar Pradesh have asked Anti-Citizenship Act protesters to either pay a fine or face jail terms. The police sent notices to 13 people in Lucknow to pay 2.1 million Indian rupees for damages during demonstrations. The police said the deadline to pay the fine ended yesterday and these individuals have to pay 10% more. They said the demonstrators have a week, failing which they will face civil imprisonment and attachment of property. Earlier, security forces put up photos, names and addresses of 57 people on hoardings across the city of Lucknow. Meanwhile, 21 people have been forced to submit 80,000 rupees through a draft after receiving similar notices. The UN says EU border restrictions will affect plans to transfer hundreds of minor refugees out of dangerous camps in Greece. Earlier, the European Union announced it is closing its external borders to all non-essential travel from third nations to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. Special Coordinator for the Refugee and Migrant Response in Europe said all possible measures must be explored to expedite refugees' relocation. Migrants at Turkey-Greece border are holding demonstrations demanding Athens to open border gates. Meanwhile, the UN Refugee Agency says it will temporarily suspend relocation of refugees in new permanent homes abroad because of travel disruptions. In a statement, the agency appealed to countries to ensure that movements can continue for the most critical emergency cases. The US has held Russia responsible for the deaths of dozens of Turkish troops in Syria for the first time. This comes after a Russian airstrike in the northwestern Idlib region killed 34 Turkish soldiers last month. Talking to media, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington stands with its NATO ally, Turkey. He said Washington will consider additional measures that support Ankara at the end of the violence. This comes as Pompeo announced new sanctions on Syrian officials. Moscow, along with Tehran, backs Assad in his bloody quest to crush rebels who are backed by Ankara. The International Monetary Fund has rejected Venezuela's request for a $5 billion loan to fight the coronavirus pandemic. The US-based financial institution said it denied the request due to a dispute over Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's leadership. The IMF said it isn't in a position to consider the request because there is no clarity on the international recognition of the country's government. Over 50 countries, including the United States, do not recognize Maduro as the legitimate president. In the U.S., Chicago's Shedd Aquarium has been forced to close amid the coronavirus pandemic. Amid the closure, the staff decided to let a few residents out of the enclosures for a field trip. Details in this report.
What would you do at the Shedd Aquarium if you had free time during its closure? Check out the animals, of course. That's what Wellington the penguin did when the aquarium was shuttered due to the new coronavirus COVID-19. The little guy is one of several rockhopper penguins who got to take a walk or a waddle under the guidance of keepers. Meanwhile, in Washington, a state sanctuary for chimpanzees once used for scientific research has scaled back its staff. Workers don personal protective gear to avoid infecting the primates during the pandemic.
We have to, in some ways, assume that we're carrying it, especially because we know that you can be completely asymptomatic but still be carrying it. So we just want to put a barrier between our germs and the chimps as much as we can. So we're all wearing gloves that we're changing frequently, and we're wearing masks to protect them from us.
Human respiratory viruses have caused lethal outbreaks among primates. In late 2016, cases of human coronavirus spread to a community of wild chimpanzees in Ivory Coast.
We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. In Nicaragua, beekeeping is a highly lucrative alternative for small-scale farmers, but the variability of climate change has affected their business. A local beekeeper turns to raise queen bees to improve the quality and production of honey. Details in this report. Climate change is rapidly affecting daily life and habitats around the globe. In Nicaragua, beekeeping is considered one of the most profitable businesses. The country exports 442 tons of natural honey to the world. But beekeepers say the changing climate is bad for honey production.
We have an average production between 35 to 40 kilograms per beehive per year, but we have been affected by climate change and it has considerably decreased production, such as producing up to 15 kilograms per beehive per year.
Incluso hemos tenido producciones de hasta 15.
A local beekeeper, Santos Flores, has found that raising queen bees is the solution to the problem.
Y eso lo logramos
Every year we gradually increase by 80 to 90% and we achieve this through beehive divisions. We have also activities such as natural queen breeding and artificial queen breeding.
Santos Flores says that working more technically is giving better production.
This allows us, as we have said before, to obtain a better production, because I no longer have to wait a month so that the queen bee can lay an egg. Here, I'll only have to wait 8 to 9 days, which is valuable time, relatively speaking.
Beekeepers believe the solution to their problem lies in innovation. As climate change progresses, those who remain dependent on traditional methods will be left behind. Now this one's for book lovers. In Peru, a once bustling railway station now serves as a library, museum and concert center. Called the House of Literature, it is one of the favorite places for people who enjoy reading. Details in this report.
This former train station is one of Perus' biggest cultural centers. Built in 1912, the station was formally inaugurated as the House of Literature in 2009. Once abandoned, it is now visited by thousands of people every day.
The House of Literature is a space for people to encourage themselves to read and to learn. No, it doesn't exist. I don't know any other places like this, not at all. This place is quite innovative. In fact, in Chile, there aren't places like this that are so iconic.
One of the star programs involves grandparents telling stories to youngsters. Its objective is to promote reading and literature in children through oral narration. The director of the House of Peruvian Literature says that it is a public cultural center of permanent dialogues.
How can we make an impact on a national level with the precariousness and fragility of our cultural institutions? You can't find cultural centers or art galleries or even museums properly implemented in all of the country's cities.
Milagros Arderiaga adds that despite the rapid growth of digital culture, written culture continues to generate curiosity and debates.
I believe that it is a question of investigating. I do not believe that social networks are distancing us from the written word. They might be distancing us from the forms of narration that were consolidated and that are going to perhaps be used less due to the appearance of new forms.
The facade of railway stations has a large iron gate where the letters F and C stand out, revealing its former use as a central railway station. The transformed cultural center has hosted art exhibitions, seminars, and reading circles for youth literature and debates.
COVID-19 has devastated the airline industry worldwide as fears of massive bankruptcies and calls for emergency bailouts increase. In the United States, airlines have sought $50 billion government bailout in the form of loans, grants, and tax reliefs. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says the airlines are grappling with a crisis far worse than 9/11. Boeing is seeking at least $60 billion in federal support to help navigate a battered aviation industry. Italy has moved to take over insolvent Alitalia, while Sweden and Denmark offer €275 million in guarantees to help Scandinavian carrier SAS. Airlines have slashed flights across the globe as millions of passengers cancelled travel and countries blocked arrivals to stem spread of coronavirus. In the UK, Amazon has asked its workers for overtime to tackle huge demand due to the coronavirus pandemic. The move comes despite the government's repeated calls to restrict social contact. The GMB trade union says workers across 4 different sites were asked to work compulsory overtime from Monday. National officer Mick Riggs said Amazon has put profit before safety. Amazon said it is working to ensure it can continue to deliver to customers. It said there is an exemptions process for employees who cannot work additional hours for personal reasons. Oil prices fell for a third session on Wednesday, with U.S. crude futures tumbling to a 17-year low. The travel and social lockdowns sparked by the coronavirus epidemic have knocked the outlook for demand. U.S. crude was down 84 cents at $26.11 a barrel, having earlier fallen to $25.83 a barrel, the lowest since May 2003. Brent crude was trading down by 37 cents. One of the leading American investment banks said the oil demand collapse from the spreading coronavirus looks increasingly sharp. In order to support economies, the world's richest nations prepare to unleash trillions of dollars to lessen the fallout from the pandemic. European markets have sunk as global stimulus measures failed to offset fears of global recession amid coronavirus pandemic. Decline in financial services stocks led the losses of major bourses. The pan-European stock 600 dropped nearly 5%. The indices of Frankfurt's DAX and Paris CAC 40 fell over 5%. London's FTSE also landed in negative territory after car manufacturer Rolls-Royce shares plunged 17%. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.